Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. This one is going to be relatively quick because this is probably going to be the last one for the night. So if you get a blip and then I'm off, that's why. BBC. The BBC, British Broadcasting Company, at least it's supposed to be broadcasting. You would hope that it's broadcasting truthfully, but maybe not so much. Maybe there's certain people who don't necessarily like. Or maybe it's just an accident that they fucked up on again. But nevertheless, BBC is showing the election results as this. Notice the numbers. Labour, a difference of 77 going up. Good job, Labour. Conservatives failed, 33. Liberal Dems up 75. Greens up 8. UKIP down 123. They utterly collapsed. And other down 4. All right. What if I told you, and this is the BBC, that this is not actually accurate? This is not correct at all. Fact is, this number is 3 times higher than what BBC is reporting this number is. And they're using this weird way of trying to justify the fact that they're miscounting the failure and the losses of the Conservative government to a tune of 3 times. The failures at the BBC. This is Squawk Box. Tory local election loss is almost 3 times the BBC published number. And why? I read through this article and I thought to myself, yeah, they're right. They're using this weird, bizarre way of trying to count the number in order to give the Conservatives, make it look like the Conservatives' losses and failures weren't as bad as the losses and failures were. 3 times more. Like, that's a stunning number. That's all I'm saying. Let's read what they're saying. The Squawk Box contacted the BBC to ask for an explanation right here. BBC has used this graphic to show the results from last week's local elections that depicts the Conservative Party's net losses of 33 councillors. All right, one I just showed you, that was live on their site. However, other news sources quoted a much higher figure, such as The Guardian. 93 seats for Conservatives, a loss of 93 seats. That's interesting. Why the discrepancy? Why the difference? Why does the BBC mistaking this so monumentally different than what The Guardian is calling the losses of Labour, of the Conservative Party? Squawkbox contacted the BBC to ask for an explanation and the discrepancy. Good on you, Squawkbox. The BBC pointed to the site detailing its methods, which says, seat change is based on how many seats each party won at the previous comparable election, not what the seats were on the eve of the election. The total number of seats per party will be slightly different between the seats at dissolution and those won at the last election. Fair enough as it goes, but slightly different may not quite cover a seat loss based on standings prior to the election. That's almost triple that's used by the BBC. Now, anybody in their right mind, when they're looking at this, looks to this and says, how many people were Conservatives on the night of the election? How many people weren't Conservatives after the election? And the difference between those numbers are the numbers that go up versus down. If someone was looking at this in their right mind, they would say what the BBC is showing is that before the election, Conservatives had a certain number of seats, and after the election, they have 33 less. That's not what the BBC is saying. The BBC is saying they're using some other method than the common sense, straightforward method of counting how many people lost on the night of the election. Gold star, BBC. Gold star. What it looks like you're trying to cover up for the failings of the Tory government and not necessarily showing the actual level of failure throughout the society. You guys have even gone to the method of saying that this wasn't a win for the Labour. Labour has won 77 seats. I mean, that's monumental. Yeah, Labour has won 77 seats. That's monumental. Not to mention the Conservatives lost 93 seats. That is horrific. That is horrific. But you don't show the horrificness of this. 33. It's not that bad. Maybe the Corbyn thing has come to a head. Maybe the Corbyn mania stops. Maybe there is no more momentum. These are the things that these people have been saying. And when you look at the real tally, 93 seats lost by the conservative government. And people expected them to lose so poorly and so badly that 93 was considered a win. The BBC doesn't even show that. BBC, incorrect information, or at the very least information that people are not looking for. What they're looking for is how many people were conservatives on the night of the election versus how many people that were not after that night. That's not the number that the BBC is showing. The BBC is showing some kind of number about the previous election and everything else, not who won and lost. That's shameful. That's utterly shameful. You're giving people misinformation, literally. And just so we can read it again to what they're doing, how they're explaining this. The seat change is based on how many seats each party won at the previous comparable election, not what the seats were on the eve of the election. But who gives a shit what the seats were at the previous comparable election? Who cares? Who cares? Who's in there now? I mean, this makes no sense. Who's in that seat now? Who's in it now? Who's in it now? Who was there on the night of the election? Nobody gives a shit about what the last election was. What they care about is who was in that seat on the day that they lost their seat. And what is the change? What's the change? What's the comparative change? Not what it was before, what it was on the night of the election. Nobody cares. Nobody looks at that and says, I wonder what was it on the last comparable election. Nobody asks that question. The BBC is answering a question that nobody asked and gets across it in this kind of squirrely, kind of nasty way. Good job on Squawk Box for contacting the BBC saying, hey, why are your numbers so off in compared to the other people who are actually giving a real reporting of the numbers on the election? Why? Is it an accident? Is it an accident? Is the BBC trying to hide how bad the Tories are because they don't particularly like Jeremy Corbyn? What is it? What is it? What I would say is the BBC is not giving accurate information. And this is not necessarily done by a mistake. I don't believe it's done by a mistake. The BBC has its own mindset. They are undermining or undercounting the failures of the Tory government and the Conservative government on their page. They've been contacted saying that the numbers that you're giving are incorrect. And they've still kept those numbers up nonetheless. BBC, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, and one more point on this, because there's something else Squawk Box makes. In addition to that, the Tories gained 2 conciliars by suddenly reinstating at least 2 candidates immediately after they were elected, who had been suspended for racist comments in order to pad out their figures in the tight boroughs. This reduces their loss figure. Based on the change from the actual position of the parties to the last week's election, the real swing in the conciliars number from Tories to Labour was 170 or 172 if the reinstated racist comments conciliars are excluded, not the 110 figure used in the broadcast and on its website by the BBC. It's amazing. I will put this at the bottom for you to read for yourself. But this is shameful, BBC. This is utterly shameful. And the fact that other news agencies don't count it this way kind of gets it across how shameful and nasty this is. Tories failed miserably, and the BBC is undermining or undercutting the level of failure that's taking place. I would wager probably, to make the argument that, hey, maybe Corbyn momentum has come to an end. I mean, after all, they only lost 33 seats. Wrong. They lost 93. And by the way, people are talking about UKIP collapsed at 123. They lost 93 seats. They lost 93 seats. That's a backhand by the public. That public is saying, we don't like what you're doing. We don't like you. Good job, BBC, on hiding that number of the Tories' loss. I ended at that. Like I said, I'm not going to keep this one long. All right, guys. If you enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe. And, of course, you can always support the Patreon. Thanks, everyone.